I am making sure that we are recording. We are. I'd like to thank you for taking time to join today's webinar. We have a wonderful host, Adrienne Guerrero, who will get started momentarily with a wonderful discussion about how we can communicate effectively in our virtual world and watching our blind spots. I see many names that have been familiar attendees with us over the Stay Connected webinar series. So before I do my big handoff to Adrienne, I do want to thank those of you who have joined us on an ongoing basis. This is actually our 14th webinar together. So thank you for those of you who have been part of it. And for anybody new joining us today, a very warm welcome. If we achieve one goal of staying connected, then I say we've done a good job. So thank you for being with us. And without further ado, Adrienne, I'm going to go ahead and switch things over to you so you can go ahead and get your PowerPoint all set.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining our final. I don't know, Leslie. We'll see if this if it comes up again, right? Maybe we'll be back. Let me get into slideshow mode here. All right, fantastic. So for those of you who don't know me, although I do see so many familiar names, so it's wonderful to see you all. I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. I'm Adrienne Guerrero. I am part of the Lewis University community. I'm an alum there with my master's degree organizational leadership, Leslie's program. And I spent 20 years, about 20 years in the HR space in corporate talent management and change management, and a couple years ago left corporate to start my own practice, Positive Delta consulting practice, focused on organizational change management and performance improvement. So I'm excited to be here to talk with you all about communication and especially the struggles and challenges with communicating virtually. I spent, out of those 20 years, I spent 10 years actually going into an office, doing the daily grind and the commute, and then 10 years working mostly virtually with the occasional in-office stints, but most of that time I spent working virtually from home. And that was, when I first started, it was before the days of the Zooms and the instant messaging and all of that capability. So I kind of learned through, felt a lot of that isolation early on. So I wanted to kick us off just to kind of get us warmed up a little bit as we're pulling things together and people are still maybe joining, is if you're willing to come off mute, share or throw into the chat, prior to our COVID stay-at-home orders, how frequently did you work virtually? Is that something that was a regular practice of yours? Was it never? You were completely thrown into this when we were ordered to stay at home? Or did you do that periodically, maybe work from home on Fridays or one or 2 days a week? A lot of never befores, it looks like. Occasional. Okay, some people regular. Yep, okay. And I know, I think for me, even though I had worked from home on a regular basis and got very comfortable, I had a nice office space set up for myself, it was still a change because I wasn't working alone, right? I wasn't in my own office space by myself. I had now additional people in the house with me who were also trying to work or trying to get through their schoolwork. So even though some of us might have been a little bit comfortable with working virtually, I think it's still been different and a different kind of experience since we've gotten into this, right? Good, okay. So we've got a nice balance, great. So I look forward to hearing your contributions then around, how things are different now working virtually versus when you remember being in an office space. Okay, so the goals for our time today, I'm hoping that we can explore our communication and our individual work styles, kind of get some understanding around that, recognize how our hardwiring influences that, and look at what are the blind spots that are created from those preferences that we have and how we like to work and how we prefer to communicate. And then what can we do about it to try to minimize those so that we're making sure we're accommodating all of the communication and the work styles. Okay, so to get us going, remember when we were in an office? So that was what, I don't know, 8 at least weeks ago. Remember when we were in an office. So let's imagine that, setting the scene, our day has just begun. You've walked into the office and you've gone to your desk. What does your day, what does that look like? What does your workspace look like? And how are you interacting with your coworkers as you're getting your day started? Feel free to come off mute and contribute, or put them in the chat. I know if you're chatting a lot, Leslie, I'll just ask you to kind of run through those with me. It's hard to read, of course, as you're kind of looking at your screen as well. I'll get started. So my office space, my desk, was very personalized. It was colorful. I had a lot of family photos, inspirational quotes, colorful calendar, probably of sailboats or flowers or something very colorful. My papers were filed neatly, or they were stacked very nicely. I had some coworkers of mine, 2 coworkers, to call out to show you some differences in styles. I had a teammate who, he had almost nothing at his desk. If we didn't have a nameplate, we would not have known it was his desk. There was nothing personal in that desk. He had 2 perfectly sharpened pencils lined up right next to his notebook that was closed. And he would come into the office with a very soft hello, friendly, but he sat down, and you might not have heard from him until we had a meeting, our first meeting together. He sat down, got straight to work. And I had another coworker who, he came in, rolled in around 10 o'clock because he preferred to work later into the evening hours. And his desk was lined with Mountain Dew cans. Before Monster drinks, I bet now it's lined with Monster drinks or Red Bull or something. And his desk was very messy to me, looking at it, very messy to him, perhaps very organized, but it gave me anxiety to walk past his desk. But that's the way that he preferred to have his workspace, right? That was what worked for him. So, okay, others, what can you share about your workspace and what your day looks like as you come in the morning? Let's see. Coffee, get situated, some side conversations with colleagues. Yep. Morning sun, plants. Oh, great. Yeah, that's a nice guy, right? So having some lively pieces there. Personal items, yes. Oh, Denise, your desk is still decorated with St. Patrick's Day things, but you decorate. Very organized, comfortable. Okay, good. Great. I think that's about right? As we look at these things, and these are just, images that I pulled. It's a recognition of our different styles, right? We may have a very neat and tidy workspace, or it might just be what seems to be kind of messy and freestyle. Could be an organization that's all our own that no one else could possibly understand. Or we might be more of a minimalist in nature and have nothing but your phone and your tablet or your laptop, those few minimal things, your coffee cup or your bottle of water. As we're coming in to start our days, we might be those who like to think quietly and organize and go through our day planners or through our calendars in more of a private kind of meditative manner. Or we may like to grab our teammates and our buddies and sort of brainstorm and think, okay, what are we tackling today? What's our goals for today? Okay, bring our coworkers together. We might need our people versus needing our headspace. Okay. Okay, so one more question for us now. Let's get ready to go to a meeting. You've got a meeting, it's in a conference room with your teammates. How are you entering the room, and what do you have with you, and what do you do as the meeting begins? And again, I'll get started. So I'm usually running in a very animated way into a conference room. I'm excited to see everyone, even though I probably was just sitting right next to them. I am carrying my laptop and my notebook, my phone, either my coffee or my water. As I get started, I sit down, turn my phone upside down, I open my laptop and my notebook, but I have everything closed that's going to distract me so that I am ready to focus on the meeting. What about others? How do you come into a conference room, and what is the first thing that you're doing as you come in? Feel free to come off mute. And our comment, I think we've used this maybe 14 times or maybe 10 times since our contributor shared this. You can push your space bar to temporarily come off mute without having to find that mute unmute button. And once you release the space bar, you will go back on mute. So don't be afraid to come off mute and share. Otherwise, I'm trying to read the Zoom chats as well.
All right, I'll come off mute.
Marie, I know your voice. I don't even have to see the video.
That's funny. So for us, our conference rooms are all whiteboard. We painted whiteboards on 3 of the 4 walls. And then we have
Cool.
a monitor, a TV monitor that we use to project any laptop stuff or do conference calls on. And so usually when I'm coming in with, so I'm one of those crazy people that I like to have my certain whiteboard pens. So I come in with my whiteboard pens, my paper, my laptop, and usually like a glass of water, a cup of water. We are usually there's conversation as we're all walking in. We're all talking to someone as we're walking in, sort of socializing as we're getting together. So,
yep. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes, you're pulling in that social aspect of it. Sounds like you're also kind of showing up very organized, ready to start the meeting. But given that you're comfortable with that whiteboard space, maybe there's a little freestyle that's mixed in there as well. Right? Trevor, thanks for contributing. You're thinking this is an interruption to my work. What can I multitask on while this meeting is happening? Yes. I think that's often true for many of us, right? Is this meeting necessary? Why am I being pulled into this? Okay.
I'll pop off mute. This is Leslie Page. I noticed Trevor's comment and I was going to say something too, because I feel like that has been hyper enhanced since we've been working at home. So I'm on a Zoom, not yours, of course, today, Adrian, but at other instances, and I'm doing a million other things. And at the end of the day, I feel like I almost got nothing done because never once was I fully present where I needed to be. And so a few days ago, it dawned on me that that's contributing to my loss of sanity and that would be a practice for me to stop doing. Try to focus where I'm at.
That's a great point. Leslie, did you find that when you were in person in a conference room that you felt less of that pull?
Absolutely. Because like you, I would come in, turn my phone upside down.
Yeah.
I'd bring my laptop maybe, but I'd try to keep it closed because so many of my colleagues were multitasking and it becomes obvious that I really wanted to pay attention. And I don't know why, since I'm at home, it's like nobody's watching and I'm on my absolute worst behavior.
And I think that's the danger of not encouraging video when you're on Zoom, right? Because if you're on video, it's much more like being at that conference table where you will notice when somebody is looking elsewhere or looking down. I mean, you could obviously be taking notes or things like that, but I think you feel a little bit more pressure to be present when you have your video turned on. But then that in itself makes people uncomfortable as well. When I started first working virtually, of course, we didn't have the ease of video conferencing. We barely had conference calls. Very little instant messaging was in place. And so you were very distracted from a lot of that, right? Where I was able to walk around the house and do things, you know, because nobody was watching me. Yep, very good. Is there anything that I missed from the chat? I think we've covered it. I'm going to just here.
I think you
Got
got
some
it.
images. Yeah, it's kind of that, that walking in a hurry, maybe distracted, maybe ready to go and organized. But again, the idea of this exercise was just to recognize our different styles and to understand, that we could be showing up very differently. And even now, as we think about it, we are showing up differently in this virtual setting, which we'll get to in just a little bit. You may have seen this before. This is a common concept. I use it a lot, but we are always bringing our whole selves everywhere we go, and work is no different than that. We're showing up at work with our whole selves, our head, our heart, and our briefcase. Our head being the behavioral and those cognitive traits that make up our personality and our styles and don't change over time. Our heart being those core values, our interests, our passions, and our briefcase being, of course, our education, our knowledge, our experience. Those two things will change as our experiences and our knowledge grows, right? But the head generally stays the same. Our behavioral traits are our behavioral traits. It's how we're hardwired, right? So those behavioral traits influence how we like to work and our communication style. What I've tried to do here is to frame these out in 4 pairs of how we like to work and how we communicate. So you might flex between each of these pairs, but it's likely that one of them will be more of your dominant trait between the two. You could also dial one up or dial one down depending on the situation that's needed, and depending on how aware you are of the needs of others, you may dial one up or dial one down. Okay? But these traits of how we like to work, and these are those examples. You think back of how you like to start your day and what your workspace looks like. Maybe it's how you tackle a group assignment or working on a team. So you may be a person that prefers to collaborate. You're the one who's going to rally the troops. So what does everybody think? Okay, let's get together. Let's really talk about this and be collective about it and gather the group of everyone's opinions. Or you may want to take it back, work on your own, form your own opinion, and then bring it to the group. Okay. You also might like to work in a way that's very structured, where you prefer to have an outlined process. You're making lists. You're showing up with a detailed set of instructions. You really want to be crisp and clear about what it is that you're setting up to do and how you're going to go about doing that, versus having a preference for that messy brainstorming. You might be the one that's showing up in the room with the colorful Post-it notes all over the, having them on the wall and taking things in and out or scribbling on a whiteboard. Marie, you might be the one with the colored markers and drawing all over the whiteboard. I'm the person in my notebook, I can't think linearly, so my notebook is filled with arrows and circles and doodles as I'm kind of processing and working through things. That's what my notebook looks like. It's like a secret language no one can interpret. So if I were ever working on something super top secret, my notebook would be safe because I don't think anyone could get anything out of it besides me. It's kind of looks a little bit messy, but that's the way that my brain is processing through things, not linear. Okay. And then your styles for how you communicate. You could be a person who prefers to talk it out, to really process and think out loud, where you might be saying things that, oh, no, I've changed my mind about that. And it's just this sort of rambling that goes on very verbally until you kind of come to that final thought. Or you may like to go away, take some notes, be very quiet in a nice quiet space, take those notes, and then again, come back. If you're a think it through kind of person, you likely don't like to be put on the spot. So it could be why many people don't like to come off mute and say, oh no, I didn't have time to really think and prepare that answer, so I'm not comfortable contributing to this, right? You want to take it back and think it through. Likewise, you may have a communication style that is very focused on a specific agenda and you want clear objectives. So when you're setting up a meeting or you're you're showing up to a meeting, you want to know exactly what those clear objectives are. What's the point? Why are we here? How are we going to go about getting through this agenda and make sure these topics are covered? Or you may prefer to be someone who, loose objective, we're here to talk about X, Y, Z, but if we decide to pivot the conversation to something else, that's okay with me. And because you can just set up another time. Someone who's got a very focused on their objectives, it could be very frustrating when somebody's going off task, and you might be the person in the room to say, okay, wait, this doesn't contribute to the objective of this conversation, so can we table this and get back to the task at hand, the topic at hand, right? I'm going to stay right here actually and ask, do you see yourself in these 4 pairs or others that you work with? Is there anything that I've not covered that you think might be missing from this? This is one take on how to frame out how we work and our communication styles. What do you think? A few of those. Do you see any of them competing with each other? This was one thing that I struggled with as I was pulling this together. I thought, can you be a think it through person and a collaborator? I think you can. I did a little research on it back, for those of you that were in my webinar last time, went back through my predictive index model, and yes, you can be a think it through. I might want to still take it away and really think through that on my own in a private, nice, quiet place, but then I still want that benefit of others to kind of to come and help to bring that energy and clear it out. A list maker. A squirrel. Yes, my husband has told me that, actually used that exact term, like, oh, you're swirling, right? Because I'm the one who can be the messy brainstormer, and I'm very fine with a loose agenda. And if we decide to go sideways on a conversation, that's okay with me. Makes it hard when you work on your own. Distracted by the birds in the backyard. And sometimes, yes, Randy, yes, thanks. Sometimes this is situational. You're absolutely right. It depends on the people that you're working with, right? Like I said, you can either dial it up or dial it down. I think a lot of that is the awareness of the people you're with and your role in that. If you are the one who has called that meeting, then you might be prone to ensure that you're coming with a more focused agenda and a clear objective, and you're going to stick to the topic at hand, even though that might not be your personal style. Good. Home is the worst in the office. Yes. Yes, I tend to agree, especially if you have any other coworkers in your house with you. They're really great for distractions, aren't they? Okay. So we talked about this a little bit already, but now let's take our scene virtual. And now we've learned a little bit about what those communication styles are, how we prefer to work. Now turn that into this virtual setting, and now you've got this Zoom meeting rather than being in the conference room. So we've talked about this already, that we're clearly have more distractions. What are some other challenges with our virtual meetings, and are there any advantages to them? What do you think? Technology can be a challenge. Yes, I agree. I think the technology can make things very hard. Again, it's that you still, even though we have cameras and we've got the video chat, it's not the same. We struggle with we can't read body language as easily, right? If you've got the the video, you are getting some of that, but I think we're still not as relaxed or in our natural state as we would be if we were actually in person. Someone's body language can show up a little bit differently than we would. It's difficult to know the tone. Frustrating when coworkers don't respond to emails in a timely manner. Yeah, JL, so that leans towards some of your how you like to work styles and communication styles, right? Defining timely, if it wasn't specifically put in that email, could be different for all of us, right? What might be timely for me, I'll get to you by the end of the week or 2 weeks from now, and you were thinking, no, I meant like an hour. Yeah, video, Randy. Yes, you got to keep up with the shaving, right? Yes, the person who likes to think it through. Thank you, Chandra. Nice to see you on this. The person who likes to think it through can get lost in an online meeting, especially if there's a large number of people in the online meeting. They could either intentionally get lost because they prefer not to communicate in that setting, or they just accidentally get lost because they tend to just be quieter. And so they're not going to necessarily reach out to say something or contribute. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thank you. I think we've had many of them, right? Like distractions. We talked about this before. There's so many distractions. Although, again, I argue that if you are turning your video on, there's maybe fewer distractions because you're forced to kind of pay attention to what's in front of your screen and close down your other windows. You can't read body language. That quiet person, the vocal person, could take over. This is something that I have seen especially when the video or the audio capability is such that it mutes everyone else when there is an active speaker. And so if you have a vocal person who is talking and they're going on and they're going on, you can't get a word in and you don't want to be rude and really try to interrupt them, but that might be the only way for you to kind of cut them off and get in. I don't know if every audio tool works that way, but for the ones that do, that can be really frustrating if there's no way to like time out. Somebody else has to say something, right? When I first started working virtually, and I'm a talker, so I talk out loud all day long. When I was working virtual, I would talk to myself all the time, answer myself. People would think I was crazy if they saw me. Fortunately, they didn't. Many times I'm walking around the house, my husband says, do you want a response to that? Or are you just like over here in your head, right? Because I'm just sort of thinking out loud and talking out loud. On audio calls or conference calls, if I wasn't intentional about slowing down and pausing, I could just steamroll the conversation and never let anybody in. So over time, and this was something that I still work on, I have to really think about stopping and pausing and asking others. I made it a practice, in fact, to literally say, I'm going to pause now for reaction or response. And I'd force myself, get that drink of water, be quiet, let other people process what I've said, because I could talk very quickly, or just have an opportunity to contribute. Did I miss anything from the chat? Chandra, once you get used to video, it helps to build trust. I think so too. I think you do have to get very comfortable with the video at first. I know I was not as comfortable with video coming into the last 8 weeks as I am now. I think the virtual backgrounds tend to help. And you're right, it does help to build trust because you can start getting a sense for people's personalities, where it's a lot harder to do that when you only have audio. Yeah, thanks for that comment. Okay.
Marisa makes a great point about that vocal person taking over. She said it just happened this morning, and the meeting can go on for so much longer than you had anticipated because people, I don't know if it's a need for connection or just because we are not speaking voice to voice as often, but I've noticed that myself, just to confirm that meetings go long, yet virtual meetings can be exhausting. So it's a fine balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a lot harder to, I think you can show that body language of in a conference room, if you have to get somewhere else or the time is coming to an end, you can physically start packing your things up and getting out, right? But you don't have those cues to follow when you're on a conference call. And so you can easily lose track of time. Yeah.
I think
Definitely.
also that we forget that although we're working, and it's understood that we're working, that we forget that we're inside of other people's homes. And so it might be lunchtime for them. It might be, learning time for them with the kids. Like, people have their own agendas, and I think we forget about those other pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not a typical, oh, this is still in the middle of your workday, so I might be making you late for another meeting, where it might be something that's more distracting than that, right? Where you've got, that person might have screaming hungry children behind them that they need to be tended to, right? Yeah. Maybe that's a little bit worse than making somebody late for their next meeting. I don't know. That's a matter of debate.
That's something to pay particular attention to, depending on where the participants are, because I'm not in the same time zone as the rest of you, or at least most of the rest of you.
Yes.
So one of the later meetings we had, it was after dinner for me. So if I'm talking to somebody at work who's on the West Coast, or if I'm talking to somebody who's in Hawaii or Alaska, sometimes you have to prepare in advance to make sure you know who the participants are.
Yes, great point. I did a lot of global projects, and so we would have time zones that were at least 6, 8, 12 hours one way or the other of where I was. So yes, I had, colleagues who it was my afternoon and they were shuffling kids off to school. So you're right, it's being aware of that and being empathetic to those things, especially now, as we're not shuffling kids off to school anymore, but we might be getting their days started as well, right? Yeah, good point.
One other thing we've learned with what we're doing with our conference calls or these meetings, is that an hour meeting is taking 2.5 hours sometimes. So setting a timer. So because you don't get those verbal clues of somebody trying to pack up their stuff or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So setting a timer, you hear the ding, it reminds you that, it's kind of dragging on and maybe you want to wrap it up.
Yeah, that's a great technique. Great idea to physically set a timer, because you don't necessarily want to have your phone turned upside down, right? So that you can see what time it is, because then you'll see all the notifications from CNN and all those distractions will be bouncing back at you.
And it's very convenient if you're working from home, you're in the kitchen and you have a kitchen timer.
There you go, your microwave. Great point. So have you recognized any blind spots as you're thinking about your own personal styles or those that you work closely with? Have you recognized in yourself some blind spots and things that you have maybe fallen down on in the last several weeks? Like I said, for me, it's liking to talk. It's talking very fast. I think, Randy, you mentioned this too. It's that slowing down your communication. So I could talk over a conversation very easily, and I have to remember to pause to let people process or to respond. That's one of my blind spots. Anybody else? Staying focused during a video meeting. Yeah. Hopefully video is maybe keeping you a little bit more engaged, but not necessarily, right? Good. Okay. So my hypothesis is that good communication covers all bases, and that is true whether you're in a virtual setting or you're in person, right? So here are some ways to make sure that as you look at these different styles and how you like to work, and in your own communication style, how are you making sure to accommodate the styles of others? And one thing that I would suggest is, if you have a teammate who you know has a dominant style that's opposite of yours, enlist that person to help make sure that you're covering that style as well. So if you're a person that likes to collaborate, make sure that you're providing opportunities for others to bring input later, so that those folks who like to work on their own, they're able to share that input, take things back, kind of work it through, and then share it later, or ask ahead of time so they have time to prepare. Vice versa, if you're someone who does prefer to work on your own, make sure that you're creating those opportunities for people to work together, and that you're allowing them to provide some of their input. If you've got this structure, if you have a preference for having a lot of step-by-step instructions and following a very clear process, you're going to want to provide clear statements about your objectives, your desired outcomes and expectations, but you're also going to want to allow time to use maybe a whiteboard or draw some pictures. And this, again, I think this is where the technology gets much harder than when we were in person, because I think whiteboards are so much harder to use electronically, and brainstorming is just so much harder to be doing that electronically. But as much as you can to kind of help others who have that sort of creative, messy brainstorming style to allow for that. Sometimes what we've done is we've literally drawn on our own pieces of paper individually, and we've either taken a quick photo of it and emailed it in, or done a quick screen share, and shown what we've drawn. That's one way to quickly get that brainstorming done in a virtual way. And then from a communications perspective of how we like to communicate, if you're a talk it out kind of person, make sure that you're allowing that input to come separately as well, or give something back. If you're in a meeting and you're working through things and you're talking through things, make sure that you're also allowing for, hey, if you want to take till the end of the day to get something back to me in addition to what we've covered here, then great, go ahead and do that, right? We've already said to make sure that we're slowing our speech so that others can kind of jump in. When we're showing up in a meeting and we are the person who wants to have that specific agenda, we want to start and we want to end on time, we want to make sure that we're summarizing our decisions and our action items, but then also make sure that you're building in that time for the sort of offline chatting, a few minutes of that casual chatting piece. And you actually could work that into your agenda either at the beginning of the end or the end, because then that way it kind of covers both of those bases, right? Where it's part of our agenda, so we're going to cover it, but let's time box it so you can meet both of those styles that way. Anything else? Any other techniques that we haven't mentioned yet that you guys have employed? What's coming up? Anything coming up in chat?
Just confirmation of the points that you've made. Nothing new. So I think you've got it covered.
Covered the bases. Okay. I tried to.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Not our communicating as far as participants, but as the leader of an online or a video meeting, have you come across anything that you would suggest to us for when we lead meetings in the future online?
Yeah, I mean, I think when again, it goes back to covering all of these bases, so make sure that as the leader, you're allowing for all of these different styles to kind of come throughout that meeting, that you're having meetings that are meaningful first of all, because people's time is very different and quite challenged right now, right? We're all taking on spinning more plates in the air than we ever have with different responsibilities. So make sure that that timing is well spent. That time is well spent. So sticking to that agenda. And if the agenda is intentionally loose, because sometimes it is, right? It's a topic and you don't have the answers, but you've got a question and you just want to brainstorm things. Keep that casual as well, because you could have people whose communication style is to be looser and to, to kind of go freestyle like that. And so I think a lot of it just comes back to this balance across all of these things and offering and being flexible. Have the agenda, but be loose about it. Allow time to talk it out and allow time for people to think it through or to work on their own versus collaborate. Perhaps as a leader, if it's a large enough team and there are people who prefer to collaborate, can you break up the task into smaller groups where the collaborators can get together and collaborate on a specific piece of action, and your work on their own, think it through, folks can take something on more independently and bring that back to the group. I go back a lot to those group assignments when you were in school and you always had a leader and you'd have somebody who would kind of come along and maybe be a little bit quieter and you'd have to draw them out. How do you get all of those kind of styles working together? What do others think? Anyone else have any suggestions for Mike?
I appreciate when, if it's possible, when people send an article in advance, because it helps to prepare you for what you're going to contribute to the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps you to identify what it is that the person that's leading the meeting is looking for. So I think that's helpful. And from, if I was planning the meeting and I send out an article, I think, or something like that, like a short description along with the agenda, I think it also helps for people to better prepare, and it kind of provides the space to give everyone an opportunity to share in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, because if you're a person who is fine just sort of skimming the article literally on the way in the door, that's what you'll do, right? But if you are more of the style where no, you want to think and really have a thoughtful contribution coming in the door, then you'll read it in advance and you'll make time for that because that's what's important to you, versus, okay, great, let me print this off and I'm going to just carry it with me and, oh, here's what I think, right? Kind of on the fly, if that's your style. That's a great point. Thank you. Anyone else? Influence and direct the meeting, but don't try to control it. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's a manner to sort of allow some flexibility within the confines of the objective, right? So it's kind of striking that balance of let the conversation go, but make sure you're bringing it back and doing time checks. If you have an agenda, there's 4 items, you have an hour, you think they're all going to be balanced equally, make sure that you're by halfway through, you've gotten through a couple of those agenda points, right? And I think another technique is if you do see things go derailing as a leader or facilitator of a meeting, something I've done before is given a kind of a timeout and said, okay, this is a little off topic. What as a group do we want to do? Do we want to parking lot this, set up a separate meeting so that we can really dive into that piece? Or do we want to pivot, and because this is important right now, and spend the rest of our time talking about this? And then you throw it out to the group and can make a decision that way of, is it a worthwhile deviation or no, right, thank you, we should get back to the point, to the original point of the meeting. Diane, I'm reading your chat. I'm trying to furiously read your chat here. Doing an assessment. Yeah, to kind of get some insight around people's styles. Great point. We do this a lot where if you can bring in the benefit of an assessment so that you can get into those communication styles and those work styles. And really, there are so many different assessments out there. Some are free, some are not free. I think the point as a leader building a team, any one of those assessments helps to start a conversation, to open the door for people to share. And that goes a long way, especially if you're building a new team. Great point. Good. Well, so I touched on this already a little bit, but as I said, good communication is good communication, whether you're in person or you're virtual. But I think it's even more critical when you're virtual. And so this is really summing up a lot of what we've already said, but 3 key points to really bring home. When you're virtual, make sure that you are slowing down, that you are increasing your listening and you're reflecting back what you're hearing, right? I mean, we've said this before on our Stay Connected series, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, twice as much listening as talking. Tough one for me, but I'm still practicing. Increase those pauses to allow people to kind of process if they're that think it through kind of style, or allow people to speak if they are trying to get a word in. Get to the point, but have fun. I think this goes back to what Randy said, that be clear on your goals and your objectives, but allow some time for that flexibility and that casual chatting. Make sure always, I think this is good meeting practice, that you're summarizing decisions and the points being made, any action items, expectations coming out of that time together. Right? And I think another key point for being virtual, as we're all working in this distributed way now, is to make yourself, as a leader, make yourself more available. So offer up those one-on-ones. We've said this before in our webinars. Be open to chats and texts and phone calls and emails. And maybe if you're the kind of person that does not appreciate those surprises and that spontaneity, how can you structure your day so that you're making that available, where it's maybe an hour a day or a half hour at the beginning and the end of your day? Make sure to be careful of time zones and who you're working with to make that available when it's convenient for them. But the idea being to be more available for those check-ins. I think the flip of that also, though, is to make sure that you're not micromanaging, right? I think, Leslie, you said it on Wednesday when we were in your webinar, that we are all getting the job done without the micromanaging right now, right? So you don't feel you need to be checking in constantly with your people. Let your people do what they need to do as long as they're showing the results of the work that you need them to do. Allow that, because we're working in different times. It's not 9 to 5 anymore. It could be 6 to 2. It could be 10 to 8. We're in and out, 10 to 12 and 2 to 8. We're all kind of in and out, and time is having to become so much more flexible because of the things that we're juggling. So allow for that and be clear on those expectations, but make yourself more available so that you can have that comfortable check-in with your people. Anything else that has come to mind, practices that you may have put into place recently that has been working well for you? Amy, signing off. Okay. Thanks for joining. Did we run out of time? No, not yet. Okay, good. I was like, oh no, I'm not doing my time check. Too funny. But that's true. I know there's some companies that try to schedule things in 45 minutes so that you've got that 15-minute buffer, right? When I was in corporate, we ran 10 minutes late to everything because we were running from one to the other. It was terrible. Good. Follow-up meetings for people to bring up points. I love that idea. Yes, that gets to that point of, hey, if you are someone who wants to take this back and think it through, we can meet again, or meet again to the things that we've put into a parking lot, right? Yeah, great point. So of course, a webinar wouldn't be a great webinar unless we had an action plan coming out of it, right? So how will you watch your own blind spots? What are those things that you're going to put into practice to help to make sure that your communication is covering all of those bases. And, again, feel free to come off mute, throw it in the chat, or just jot this down for yourself. But I would say if there's something that has come to mind in the time that we've spent together, really write it down, jot it down, put it on a Post-it note somewhere where you can see it so that you're reminded of this new practice that you might want to put into place. Denise, yeah. Sum up what needs to be addressed. Yeah, always have those key takeaways. Who's going to do them and when is the deadline? Great point. Maurice, slow down, make sure people have time to think. Yeah, that's a big one for us talkers. Make space for all communication styles. Ellen, yeah, what needs to be done? Tasks given and dates to present. Great. Good. Very good. I hope that you have found this valuable. Thank you for spending either a coffee break or your lunchtime with us. I know that we have covered, there have been so many webinars out, but I hope that maybe we've pulled some nuggets for you that are unique or new, or have helped you to think of a new idea that you can use in your daily routines to make things a little bit more manageable for yourself and share with your team. Leslie, do you want to wrap us up if there's any kind of Lewis news to share?
Well, I can just offer my gratitude and thanks to so many of you who have been part of our ongoing Stay Connected webinar series. We did come back with an encore. I don't know if we're going to have another encore. It seems as though we might have reached capacity, but we are all, I can speak on behalf of all the presenters, just grateful for the energy and frankly, the connection that you've brought to these webinars, because together is better than alone. And so some of these big issues that we're tackling are hard to do by ourselves, and we get kind of caught up in our own minds, and just being together, throwing ideas out there is a great way, even with people we have just met through these sessions. I loved Mike's point about coming from different time zones. We're coming from different industries, different disciplines, different fields, but in some ways we're tackling some of the same obstacles, and it's great to have done that together. So we're just feeling grateful for your time and energy. Lewis University, if you're not connected with us yet, please do find either myself or the organizational leadership department of Lewis University, does have a LinkedIn group. So we'd love to have you part of that for ongoing conversation. And again, just a big thank you, and be well.
Yes, and thank you, Leslie, for organizing. Thank you, Marie, for all the wonderful graphics that you've pulled together for both series. What a great collaboration.
Thanks. Right back at you, Adrian. Well, thanks to everybody. We'll go ahead and close out the session, but wonderful to be with you all today. Enjoy a wonderful weekend.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take care.